Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you all for being here in what is a very busy week. We've got a packed room, both here in the room and also online. So thank you all for taking the time to be with us here today. And really excited to pick up on the last few conversations. We're here in a world that's experiencing massive technological acceleration and also geopolitical uncertainty. And as you well know, over the last few years in particular, there's been this increased discourse on digital sovereignty, tech sovereignty, for competitiveness, security, resilience, amid a lot of this uncertainty and fragmentation. And I'm curious how you think about that. I think folks have their own definitions of what digital sovereignty means, and I'm curious whether or not that would contribute to greater fragmentation and how fragmentation, if that is in fact the case, could in fact be a tax on growth, innovation, and AI diffusion.
Well, great setup, and thank you for having this conversation, and thanks to Foreign Policy for convening this. You know, I approach this as somebody who's been in her role now 9 months. I'm as the announcement said, the head of global affairs for Microsoft, which brings together our national security and cybersecurity policy expertise, along with our global engagement and global affairs and international policy function. And so what I have been hearing and experiencing in this job is really a focus on this sovereignty issue. And you've teed it up really well. I've spent the last 9 months traveling around from Europe to Latin America, Asia, you name it. And what used to be, I would say, a European issue, it was kind of where you first heard digital sovereignty questions and issues, really has gone global. And it is actually in response to what you said, fragmentation, politically, trade volatility, concerns about the threat environment, from cyber to kinetic conflict, obviously, as we're seeing, obviously, in Europe and Russia and Ukraine, and now, of course, in the Middle East. So very real concerns about sovereignty and security and trust. And from my perspective, from our perspective at Microsoft, you actually can't have sovereignty without that security and trust, right? There's no way to protect or have digital sovereignty if you can't protect your digital borders. So we see these things as intertwined. And at the end of the day, you're absolutely right, sovereignty is defined differently in many different instances. But I have seen, as long as I've been in this role, a very common thread. And the common thread across all the conversations is resilience. And that is about control, obviously. If you're a government, if you're a company, can you control how your most sensitive data is handled? It's about confidence in the resilience of those services and the continuity of those services in an increasingly fragmented and world of so many different types of threats. It's about the ability to have that control, have that confidence, and have a competitive atmosphere. And this is really, you're right on point with this tax question, because at the end of the day, you aren't going to have that confidence, that control, that continuity of service, or the competitiveness if you're walling yourself off, right? Sovereignty often is I think, confused with the need to contain and wall yourself off from other providers or other innovative technologies. But if you do that, you're walling yourself off from the intelligence about the cyber threats that allow, in our case, Microsoft expertise and technology to protect governments and customers at the speed of cyber, to do what we did at the start of the Russia invasion of Ukraine, which is evacuate Ukrainian government data from their physical location to secure data centers and cloud in Europe. So having that ability to manage those risks in a really dynamic environment, to have a technology stack that allows you to open it up to open source, to developers, to startups and scale-ups, that is what is going to drive that prosperity that we need.
Thank you for that. There's a lot to unpack
Yeah,
there.
sorry about that.
No, not at all, not at all. We're getting to the heart of some very complex and important issues as it relates to economic growth and competitiveness, and what can be done not to stymie that effort. You know, we're sitting here against the backdrop of the IMF and World Bank meetings, and we're talking about the leveraging of technology for growth and what can facilitate technology adoption and AI diffusion.
Yep.
But we still see this growing gap, right, between developed and advanced economies, lower and middle income countries. And so when you think about that diffusion, how can that gap be increasingly closed to ensure that that technology is leveraged to facilitate economic growth in those that are in the lower and middle income spectrum?
I'm so glad you framed it that way, because that's what it should be about. It should be about making sure that this transformative technology is able to, that the benefits of it is able to be felt broadly, right? Not just in the global north, but across the global south, across all economies. And that only happens with that effort at diffusion. So we at Microsoft for the last year have issued a series of reports, we're calling them AI diffusion reports, where we're measuring the adoption and the usage of AI. And it will probably not surprise this audience to know what we've measured and what we've seen is a very substantial and unfortunately growing gap between the global north and the global south. So amongst the measurement of working age population, 25% in the global north of working age population is using AI, and about 14% in the global south. And as we have released these reports over the course of the last year, we're seeing that gap continue to grow. And we've got to get it moving in the opposite direction. And how do we do that? The approach we are taking is to try and drive that diffusion by making substantial investments across the board. And when I say investments, you often think of data centers and bricks and mortar. And yes, we are doing that, but it's about access to the fundamentals that drive that ability to provide access to AI and other technologies. It's about access to energy and connectivity. It's about making sure that the large language models are built not just in English, but in low resource languages, right? So we're making investments there. It's about driving the benefits to the broadest section of the working population through diffusion with skilling, with workforce development efforts and investments across the board. Because it's only by increasing that access across the board that we're going to drive that diffusion to try and close that gap.
Picking up on that a bit, there's AI diffusion and there's the connectivity and the ecosystem that you're describing. And when we're thinking about investments, especially in low and middle income countries, but around the world, how important digital public infrastructure is becoming for service provision of all types, whether it's access to water, to payments, to you name it. And inherent in that is the need for security to enable business continuity and to enable growth on the ground. And so I'm curious how you're thinking about that. And you mentioned it before, but I'd like to dig in a little bit deeper about that nexus between sovereignty and security.
Yeah. So you're right to call out the digital public infrastructure work that's gone on. I look at a country like India that has done so much and been so innovative in digital public infrastructure, and the young and growing population that's there, the kind of innovation ecosystem, it is ripe to kind of leapfrog in that ability to prosper and grow the economy there. That's why you see us making a $17 billion investment across data centers, cloud infrastructure, skilling investments, and the like, which is part of, frankly, a $50 billion investment across the global south that we're on track to hit by the end of this decade. When it comes to security, I come back to this idea that while people think about sovereignty as kind of drawing a moat and borders around an area and around data, but that comes at a real cost. It walls you off from that threat intelligence, from that ability to defend against cyber attacks, and it kind of reduces your flexibility when, God forbid, you're having to respond to other types of conflict. So really, it's about making sure that there is that choice for the most sensitive workloads, the most sensitive data, but also to ensure that there is a platform that can feed a open, inclusive, and really dynamic ecosystem for developers of all kinds. And it really, though, has to start with trust.
So then picking up on that, we've got that dynamic between digital sovereignty, security, and inherently that requires trust, trust building. And there are a lot of questions around trust in the tech space. And a few months ago, where we saw each other last at the Munich Security Conference, there was also the launch of the Trusted Tech Alliance.
Yeah.
And that was just now, 2 months ago, 3 months ago. And I'm curious if you could pick up on that a little bit and talk a bit more about the alliance, the priorities and principles, and why that is important now. And also, in a world of great uncertainty, why an alliance such as that can be and maybe should be industry-led.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised this, because I think the Trusted Tech Alliance, it's a really exciting and I do think much needed effort. So this is a group of, at this count, 16 companies that Microsoft was really proud to join with, and it was launched at the Munich Security Conference. And it's 16 companies from around the globe, I think at last count from 11 countries and 4 continents, but importantly, right now representing really every aspect of the tech stack, from hyperscalers for sure, but chip makers, app developers, because it really is about responding to this moment that you're talking about. Look, there's incredible geopolitical volatility, uncertainty, fragmentation, and we think it's really important. What this group of companies came together to do is to say, we think it's important that we understand why there is this concern, why there is this concern about sovereignty, about trust in technology. Look, there's tremendous concern about the direction that AI is going, about the corrosive impact of social media, about whether folks in some countries can rely on the continued provision of services if they're from companies from other countries. We want to respond to that moment and say, look, trusted technology is something that governments and companies should be able to rely on, especially when this ecosystem is powering and what we rely on for the most critical aspects of life and society, from financial services to healthcare to you name it. So what should we think about when we think about trust in technology? And this group of companies has come together to say, there's a set of kind of principles and commitments that we all banded together to describe what a trusted tech stack looks like. It's about ethical governance and transparent governance of the company itself. It's about secure development of the products and services that the company and the provider provides. It's about supply chain oversight and security. It is about making sure that there is an open ecosystem for open source providers that is inclusive. And I think, as importantly as all the rest, about privacy and adherence to data protection and the rule of law. This is the commitment that this set of companies has made, and says, don't just trust us, verify that we are living up to these commitments, and this is how we are governing ourselves, this is how we're developing these products and services. And so, you asked, why is it industry-led? Look, at a time when governments are having an increasingly hard time coming together to address problems, I think, and I know this is the view of Microsoft, we have a responsibility as a company, and I think we have a responsibility as an industry to respond to these concerns and say, this is what we're about in terms of solving them.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I think those core principles are uniting. And it's interesting that within a tech sector that many look to as being very intra-competitive, that there is an alliance on these foundational principles throughout the tech stack to enable that and enable operation around the world for interoperability and sort of the fostering of ecosystems. So we're out of time, but one quick question for you before we go is, so the Alliance was established or launched about 2 months ago.
Yep.
So when you look forward, what does success look like to you, and what are those metrics and timeframes?
So I would say growth in that alliance, does it truly represent all aspects of the globe? And we are well on our way to that. Does it represent all aspects of the stack? And again, we've got representatives across the board for that as well. And then are those principles being lived up to? And the alliance, what we committed to was a verifiable mechanism to say, are you being transparent in your governance? What is your commitment to secure development? So it comes down to, yes, trust, but also verify.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for your time today and sharing some of your insights and the ongoing work with us.
Thanks so much.